One of the most interesting and exciting sessions that we have. It's really looking at the cutting edge of the future of conversational assistants, how they can interact with users at the right time to ask them questions and really start engaging in meaningful conversations going beyond just question answering. So it's really looking at what is mixed initiative. I'm really excited by all the talks that we have here, looking at different aspects of that problem, looking at how do we simulate users, how do we figure out when and how to diversify, and looking at risk patterns. So when is the appropriate time to ask the question and what question should be asked. And then we're also going to be looking at holistic kind of search bot and different Wizard of Oz strategies and how the role of initiative really plays a fundamental role in the effectiveness of conversations and information seeking. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. This is Sandeep Avula, and that's joint work with co-authors, Jaime Arguello, and the third author as well. Sandeep is currently at Amazon, and I believe he's going to be presenting remotely. So Sandeep, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks for the introduction, Jeff. So, can I take it away?
Okay, we can see your slides, and maybe we can see him as well. I would also ask our participants to make sure that think of questions. We hope to have a really engaging, kind of interesting discussion with our panelists after their talks. Okay, well, I think we're ready now. We have you, Sandeep.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Sandeep Avula, and today I'm presenting work I did with my collaborators Bogum Choi and Jaime Arguello on the effects of system initiative during conversational collaborative search. So this work basically builds on two areas of research, collaborative search and conversational search. And I will not be touching anything about collaborative search today, completely be focusing on conversational search part. Now, but I just want to set the stage as to the context of the study. So basically collaborative search is this practice where multiple people are working together on an information seeking task. And people have come up with a bunch of tools in the past to make this possible. And one standard way that they would do is that they would have a big search engine, and then they would have a bunch of add-on technologies. That strategy did not work. And then which led to another strategy where you start building these search tools into the messaging platforms. So this led us to do a couple of studies, one approach, which is what I call a reactive approach, where the users are expected to explicitly interact with these search bots or search engines inside a chat platform. And a proactive approach where the search bot or the search system basically infers the information needs and proactively jumps into the conversation to provide suggestions. Now, while we found benefits with both these approaches, there were some fundamental problems. One of the main problem was the point of intervention. Now, we found that participants were particularly annoyed when the intervention point happened too soon, too late, or there was some kind of disruption to their current processes. So this led us to start thinking about what are adaptive ways in which these search systems can engage with participants in a conversation. And that's when we started leaning towards mixed initiative approaches. Now, I first want to also now introduce the whole concept of conversation search with mixed initiative right now. So I'm sure everybody is familiar over here with when I talk about what conversation search means. And really one nice work that sort of helped, I believe, not just me, but a lot of people to sort of center in terms of terminologies has been this work from Ledlinsky and Crosswell, where they give a nice definition on what does conversation search mean. And one of the key properties that they mention in their work is about the system being able to engage in a mixed initiative interaction. Now, what does that actually mean? I want to very, very briefly give you what that means. Now, typical systems, when you kind of interact with them, like your search engine or Q&A systems, the interactions are kind of one-sided. That means you're either asking system for something and system is giving you back some information, or the system is asking you a bunch of questions and you're basically replying back. Now, in a mixed initiative interaction, the exchange can go both ways, and both parties can also take initiative whenever they want to. It's not turn by turn. Now, to understand more on this, we looked into research on human dialogues and narrowed in on the framework for mixed initiative dialogues by Shu, Carroll, and Brown, who provide a functional characterization of what a mixed initiative interaction could be. So they basically characterize initiative into two types, dialogue and at the task level. At the dialogue level, the core idea is to take initiative to establish mutual belief. And at the task level, the idea is to propose actions to move the task forward. And for our study, what we did was to cast these definitions in a manner that is suitable for a search setting. So we came up with 3 conditions, which we call them as search bot conditions. And I'm going to go through each of those conditions and explain how we operationalized both the bot dialog and the task initiative. And before I do that, I also quickly want to mention that mixed initiative interactions has been explored in a bunch of different areas where they provide taxonomies and a bunch of frameworks to think about the problem statement. We have a nice related work section on this. So if you're interested to read more about it, I highly encourage you to do that. Now, one of the first condition that we had is what I will be calling as the bot info. Effectively, what this condition was meant to do was to replicate a very standard conversational system where you provide a request and then you get back a response to that particular request. So you see that in the snippet of interaction over there. The next condition, which is the bot dialog, which is when the system can take dialogue level initiative, is the condition where the user is basically providing some kind of asking the system for some kind of information. The system is I am not so sure, it's a little too vague, so it's going to ask a clarification question, and then the user is going to respond back to that clarification question. Now things get super interesting when the system can start taking task level initiative. So what the system can do over here is to not just simply ask clarification questions, it can provide suggestions, and it can also do all of these actions in a very proactive manner. So it's introducing a lot of new elements of interaction over here. So on the left, if you see, we have a bunch of interactions where there are simple follow-up questions and then responses happening. And on the right, you see this is where it gets interesting, where the system has actually never been invited into the conversation and decided to just jump into the conversation. So since we have these 3 conditions, we wanted to really understand how do users perceive these kinds of systems when they are basically working together on some kinds of tasks. So we set a set of objectives to measure how users perceive these kinds of different levels of initiative. And to do this, what we basically did was we conducted a study where it was a wizard of our study. I'll tell you a little more about who the wizards were. There were basically 3 decision-making tasks and 3 search bot conditions. And we did a 2x2 Latin square design and ended up with a 9 ordering. And we did that 3 times. So you needed 27 pairs of participants, 33 female, 11 male, and 10 did not want to identify themselves. And for the role of the wizards, we basically hired a bunch of reference librarians. These are professional reference librarians. And we also had them trained specifically for this task. And there's a very strong reason why we did that. So expertise of reference librarians is super important if we want to really observe these quality mixed initiative interactions. If we did a bunch of pilots where, we did it with a couple of regular people or tried to do it on Mechanical Turk and the quality was just not there. So this is the physical setup of what the study was looking like, when we did the user study. So on the left pane that you see, this was prior to each task. It was a room where everybody got together. And the top part, you see, those were the rooms. And in the middle section, you see when the study began, the wizard took the moderator, the moderator basically took the wizard to one room and both the other participants collaborated in another room. And there's an after study simulated recall interview, which I'm not going to cover over here. That's another work that's under review right now. So now I want to talk about what did we find? Well, in terms of utility, what we basically found was that participants felt that they covered a lot more information in the bot dialog condition versus the other conditions. And participants also felt most disrupted in the boss task condition in comparison to the other conditions. In terms of the NASA TLX, the workload, participants experienced the greatest level of frustration in the bot task condition. And participants also expended the least, they felt that they expended the least amount of information in the bot dialog condition. And these were some of the communication and collaborative measures that we were also measuring. First, just focus on the one which is on the left. Basically, what we found was that the total messages that were exchanged were least in the bot dialog condition. And this curve that you see between that's happening, it's kind of continues in all the other measures too that we have. With what I mean is in the total links that were being sent in the conversations, the total explicit interactions that were being made with the wizard, and the total number of times search bot was taking initiative too. And basically what this is sort of like saying is that the economics of like interacting, the interactions that were happening in the bot dialog conditions were far better than the bot task condition. And there's another metric which is called TRD. What this is that we were basically counting the number of times there were these unique dimensions that were being discussed in the task. And what I mean by unique dimensions is that, so we gave participants a decision-making task which had a certain set of criteria. So what we wanted to basically identify was what are the unique different kinds of criteria that participants are introducing or talking to each other. In a little while, I'll tell you like why is that important. Now, there was also like another qualitative analysis that we had done in the study, and we found like a bunch of themes. I can't actually, for the consideration of time, I can't go through all of them, but I just want to like go through one of them. So one of the benefits that participants found, especially with the bot task condition, was in regards to proactivity. So P50 participants said that, you know, they enjoyed Max as the agent. We just gave them Max name so that it was easy to like refer to them. I enjoyed Max could join the conversation and narrow searches. So basically participant enjoyed the fact that Max could just jump in and filter results for them. And then P16 found great utility with Max, the search bot, when they could basically, when they found themselves being stuck in a task, Max could basically jump in and give them new ideas to like move forward with the task. So like new task directions whenever you sort of like are feeling stuck with what to do next. And there were also like very important challenges that we've noticed when a system can take initiative. These were like the main ones, like the full details are in the paper, so you can go through that. I just want to like point out one of it, which is actually like super important for all systems that can exhibit any level of proactivity, which is disruptions. So one of the main complaints was that people, the users could not completely comprehend why the agent would proactively jump in. So basically what it means is that they could not understand the rationale for why the system was taking initiative. And that made it, that basically cast the proactive, intervention into a form of disruption. And secondly, this was super interesting is that some participants mentioned that when they found that Max was actually jumping in with good suggestions, they kind of felt taken aback because they felt that Max was not confident on their abilities to continue completing that task. So these are like two things which I'm just like noting, and there are a couple more. But the point that I'm sort of like trying to want to like really drive forward is that a system taking initiative has a bunch of like these negative challenges, which we really need to think deeply on how to make it easier or more palatable for people to, accept the system taking control over the entire collaboration. So I want to just highlight a couple of like main results from this. There are like a bunch more. You can read that in the paper on what to take away or like what are the big things to think from these types of studies. The first thing is this: getting task initiative right is extremely hard. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. So being very precise, like precision has to be like super high on not just in terms of relevancy of information, you got to get the timing right. You also have to be very good in terms of how exactly are you delivering the information to. Now, what I mean by delivering information is that when you simply provide a suggestion, you kind of like need to also think about how do you rationalize to the user on why this suggestion is particularly being made to them. Like they need to kind of like grasp your understanding to what is happening. And the other thing that we've noticed is that these task level initiative can also lead to a lot of like unintended effort. So what I mean by that is this: let's say you are working on a particular sort of a strategy, the system comes back and says that, the strategy is not good, you need to go and think back. What basically that means to the user is I need to go back and like do a bunch of like work again. So they may feel frustrated. Now, this may be a bad thing in certain scenarios, but in certain scenarios, this may actually be what is needed. For example, if this was a very critical situation task, that may exactly be the thing that is needed. So the point that I want to like note over here is that I know that the lens through which we've been like looking at system initiative has been a little harsh. And we also need to like understand that sometimes, even though participants may say that I did not like it, like the fact that the system was jumping in and telling them not to do something, but sometimes such kinds of interventions are necessary. So how do we make that negotiation happen? And finally, this was something super interesting that we found is that there were a lot of participants who mentioned that the fact that the system could like incorporate the feedback was awesome, like they really enjoyed that, it was able to follow the conversations and like incorporate the feedback and the suggestions it was providing. But also they felt like as if like, somebody was like sneaking in, spying in and looking into the conversations, and that made them feel a little uncomfortable to continuing engaging with with the search bot. And in terms of agency, this is basically like, so in psychology, there is this term, it's called like locus of attention, I believe. I mean, like, I may be like butchering the name right now. Basically, the idea is this: at times you have a sense of control on how to move the task forward. But if you have an external agent coming and telling you do this, do that in a particular sort of a way, you kind of lose grasp on how you have particularly conceptualized on moving a particular task forward. So that may leave you feeling a little bit incomplete or feeling a little bit discouraged to continue with your task. So as we are like thinking about like building these mixed initiative systems, my like key big points that I want to like give away to the audience over here is that like, please consider these kinds of challenges and try to incorporate them into the systems that you are building. So there's a lot more I couldn't cover because I know that we are sort of like on a tighter time frame over here. So if you're interested, the full paper is already out. So please feel free to like check it out. And like, my Twitter handle is there. You can hit me up over there or just email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. So I think we're a bit tight on time, but maybe we have time for one quick question from the audience. If we have it, I don't see any questions online currently, but if you have one, please ask. And then, yes, any questions for our speaker? We can also continue to ask questions at the panel as well. Okay, we have one question from the audience here. You can introduce yourself when you ask your question as well. So
yeah. Hi, Alexander Bondarenko, University of Halle. Thank you very much for the talk. Did you have like so basically in the conversation you could go on and on, right? In your user study, did you define or how you defined the like stop condition maybe, or was it just predefined, just particular? So this number of turns and that's all. Thank you.
Yep. So there wasn't a limit on the number of turns, but there was a time cap. And participants were given a decision-making task. So they kind of like had an objective in mind, like there was like an end to the task. It would not go like on forever. So there was a clear objective that they had to meet towards the end. And most participants, I believe they finished somewhere between I think the average time that they finished was between 13 to 14 minutes.
Great, thanks. Okay, let's thank our speaker. And I think you're up next. So we now have Alexander Bondarenko. He's going to be presenting work on clarifying questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. I'm Alexander, and
sorry, could you take off your mask, if you're comfortable, so that we can hear you more clearly?
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm Alexander, and you can see my co-authors, Ekaterina and Matthias. I'm going to talk about the user study on clarifying comparative questions. Sometimes search queries or search questions are ambiguous, and one of the techniques having been studied is that the system engage in the conversation, in particular asking clarifying questions. Amazing works were done by Hamid Zamani and co-authors on studying clarifying questions, particular for Bing, and we largely follow his ideas and approaches, but we would focus on comparison scenarios in search. Back in 2020, I was at Wisdom, and there was a presentation from Google. Don't remember who exactly was presenting. And I saw this slide. So they told back then in 2020, they saw an increase of queries which were ending with "for me" by 60%. There are two exciting things that I found on this slide is that the questions are comparative, what are best running shoes for me. And the second exciting thing is about exactly this ending "for me." So basically, a search system should kind of know more about the user, right? Running shoes for me, and at least like who are you? So are you a professional runner? Maybe your favorite color, your size, shoe size, and so on. The reason I was at Wisdom was I was presenting our paper where we, among other things, looked into a search engine log and identified comparative questions, did some qualitative analysis, and basically we clearly saw two major groups or clustering of comparative questions. If we look at the first one, which is better, Bali or Phuket, what we saw about that, so you basically have the comparison options or objects, Bali and Phuket, but what is missing is a comparison aspect. So you can compare those destinations over price, over safety, and so on. And this is probably, we thought, this is probably something that is still missing in the query, so that a search system should effectively, should be able to effectively answer and address this question. And the second type was when there are no explicit to be compared objects, like what is the best antibiotic, and so maybe the user wanted to compare like specific, like penicillin versus something else. Like 2 years later, so we published a study at CHIIR, and where we actually investigated whether clarifying questions in these comparative scenarios would be helpful for users to find the precise answers to the questions. So basically what they mean when they type like beta, value, or pocket, and so on. So we envisioned a system which would engage with the user in an interaction, and for the question which is better, Bali or Phuket, the system would proactively suggest the clarification options, the aspects. So asking, do you want to compare me over nightlife, over prices, breakfast, and so on, or you don't care? So to get more information, what is meant under this question. And after getting the answer, so I want to compare over nightlife, the system would be able to deliver and to find more precise results. We developed a prototype system. We conducted small user studies with 7 participants. We predefined comparative questions. We found clarification options, both for aspects and both for objects. And the system interface would reflect a search engine SERP, where we presented the top 10 results with the document title, with a snippet, and users could also click on the title and go to the web document just to explore it. And the system, our participants were able to saw results both without clarification, like just better, and after the clarification, and they could just switch between the results and to think about with what results they were better satisfied. And we asked them these 3 questions: how the results were satisfactory, and whether clarification was helpful to find the answer that you are satisfied with, and whether you enjoyed using the clarification option for the search of the search system. So this is just, again, a reminder for us what we did. 2 types of clarifications and 2 basically user studies. One to clarify the comparison aspects, and the second study to clarify the objects, and then consequently to clarify the aspect. A couple of results. So we saw that like more than 70% of the participants decided to use clarification because they were like, on the other hand, they were maybe not satisfied with the results. On the other hand, they were probably just curious, like, you know, to see, oh, what's going to happen if I decide to clarify questions. Interestingly, more often they decided to clarify aspects. It was like 90% of users, and less often, 71%, I think, just decided to clarify the objects. But they also said that these clarifications really helped them to arrive to the correct answer, and they enjoyed the interaction with the system. For the future work, maybe a larger study, and of course, developing actual approaches that would generate these clarification options and clarifying questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think we have time. Thanks for staying on time. I think that's great. And we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I'm Ivan from UZI Lugano. I had a question, like, so you said in the end that these are predefined comparative questions.
Yes.
And like you also, like manually or humans found the comparison aspects as well. So you mentioned identifying comparison aspects would be a challenging task to do automatically. But also, is it easy to even predict if the question is comparative or not? Because maybe in the first example, which is better, this or this, is easy. What is the best antibiotic? Okay, also has the best, but are there any questions that are kind of not so clear that are comparative?
We do have a classifier for that, and you're right. So our classifier to identify comparative questions is a cascading ensemble, and we start just with lexical rules. So beta, and then you have or. This is definitely comparative questions always, and like we proposed a precision-oriented classifier. So we always want to have a precision at 1 for the class of comparative questions, and in the end, I think we achieved result of like you have precision of 1 and then recall over 60%, I think 64, 65, yeah, to identify comparative questions. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi there. You're saying that you're going to generate methods for clarifying suggestions. Do you consider personalization on those on that algorithm? For example, one user might be more likely to ask about nightlife or food than general aspect. Would you consider that?
That would be nice, but as the next step. So the first step, I would just go try to like to start like a cold start. So basically, I don't know the user. So I would think about like how I would then address and what aspects should I show. Yeah, but you're right. Is for users. They are different, but I mean, like, I want also to, I want that the system also suggests, and I need, for example, if I suggest 3 options, I need to decide which 3 aspects I show. Yeah, if you want to know how I'm going to do this, we can talk later about that. Yeah, so I have the idea, like how to start if I don't know the user at all. Yeah, but then personalization could be the next step, of course. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
I had a kind of a related question myself. So that related to personalization. So it's not personalization, but would be elicitation. And so it would be, what is the best antibiotic? And the system might say, why do you want to know? What are you trying to, what medical condition might you have? So I could help you, or if you're talking about Bali and Phuket, kind of asking questions that are more personalized, like what are you interested in? And then being able to, instead of just presenting results, to get the user to engage on the other side. Is that something that you considered?
Can you come again, because I
So,
didn't get completely.
kind of elicitation instead of clarification. So instead of kind of selecting from a list, to ask the user what they might like.
Yeah.
So it's not personalization, but like eliciting from the user their rationales for why they're asking.
How is it different? I mean,
one is user-centric. It's presenting the questions that are what they're interested in and their tasks. And the other one is presenting kind of general options, like there's 4 classical, kind of guiding the user and saying here are 4 options, right, to choose from. So it's a little bit different perspective.
All right. I don't know how to answer your questions at the moment. Yeah.
Maybe we can discuss in the panel.
Yeah, we can discuss definitely.
I think there was one more question, or we're a bit over time, but if we can squeeze it in.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask, what's your opinion about the effect of the corpus, let's say, in this task? So if I see the first question, which is better, Bali or Phuket, I think to a large extent, search engines today work well because there's a vast amount of knowledge out there. So it's likely that you are still able to retrieve a large document that compares Bali and Phuket on several aspects.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your opinion about that, and how this work influences this effect, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, like, there have been some studies, so I'm thinking out about the SERP and the snippets that have been shown. And there have been studies who try to estimate how many people actually do not click on the document, because like it takes time and so on, and just go quickly through the top K snippets and just decide, well, okay, this already answers my question, right? And then you I mean, like, I don't have the numbers if I say, or if I type which is better, Bali or Phuket. I cannot tell you now what kind of snippets we will get, right? And which kind of aspects we will get. But if I type what is better, like, I don't know, for nightlife, or what is better, depends how you formulate. So there is a higher chance that you already get the results that would compare Bali and Phuket already at the top of the document, right? So this is this answer.
It was, I mean, also a bit of an open question.
Yeah. So it's, I would say, so probably if I'm interested in the nightlife more, then I will just spend less time to find that particular relevant information if I would have formulated more precisely my question or query.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to complement on that, I guess it's still meaningful in the sense that you cannot read an entire huge article about all different aspects of Bali and Phuket to a user.
Yeah. Unless you're bored and you have a lot of time. Yeah.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And next up, we have Ivan Sekulić. He's going to be looking at, talking about user simulation and how we can look at scalable ways of developing mixed initiative methods. So take it away.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so first, let me start by saying that I really like how this workshop is organized. Like, very quantitative group. The related work section of the thesis is basically writing itself. So, yeah, that's good. So, in this study, I'm going to talk about how we can maybe start creating user simulators for mixed initiative conversational search. And just to set the stage, I I'm calling it the wrong way. Makes sense. Just to set the stage, so we're dealing with conversational search and mixed initiatives. So the task is to to retrieve the relevant documents in response to the user's query. Of course, these documents should satisfy the user information need. And here in this image, we have two users with two different information needs. So user on the left is interested in human memory, user on the left in computer memory. However, they issue the same query, and this is where ambiguity comes in. So one of the solutions of proposed in recent years where mixed initiative comes in is where the system can actually ask a clarifying question. And for example, here the system can ask, are you interested in computer memory? And of course, the answers of these users will differ based on their information need. So the user on the left says no, as he's interested in human memory, while the user on the left says yes, and even leaks their information need even further. So how to get these answers to clarifying questions? You do some crowdsourcing studies, you ask users through user studies or something similar. However, that's quite expensive and time-consuming. So this is where the user simulator comes in. What we propose to do is to actually, based on all these contexts, so the information need, the query, the clarifying question, we want to generate the answer automatically. Now, the very important thing is that the answer needs to be in line with the information need. Here, the information need in this work is represented as kind of a sentence of describing what the information need actually is. And these tuples of information need, query, clarifying question, and answers are taken from Kulak and QueryQ. Basically what we do is fine-tune a large-scale language model on this data where the input is the information need and the clarifying question, and the language model target is the answer. So the model needs to predict the answer, and this answer needs to be in line with the information need. We evaluate this in 3 different ways. First, we compare the generated answers to the human answers with automated energy win metrics. Second, we perform document retrieval with the expanded query with this answer, so something similar that's been done for the QueryQ challenge. Lastly, we perform human annotation in terms of usefulness and naturalness of these answers. So I'm not going to talk about the first two because these are just 2 big tables, which might not be super interesting. But let's mention the third way. So we asked crowdsourced workers to assess whether which answer to clarifying question is better. So the one generated by the user simulator or the one produced by a human from the data set. And each pair of the answers is judged by 2 crowd workers. We define the win for the user simulator if both crowd workers said this question is more natural or more useful, and likewise for the human questions. And we define the tie if the crowd workers were undecisive. So here we kind of see that the quality is quite high in terms of naturalness. As we know, the large-scale language models are quite good at producing text nowadays. But also the usefulness, which is defined whether the answer is in line with the information need, is also achieved quite respectable results, where we couldn't really reject the hypothesis of equal performance. So let's look at the examples of answers. And here we have some maybe nice examples, but also some of the examples that can serve as a point of discussion later. So in the first example, let's see if I can use this. Oh, it's too complicated for me. So in the first example, how do you treat severe angular show it, is, I don't know, is the information need. The information need is represented with a query, which is kind of omitted, but it's usually 1 or 2 words. So then the clarifying question posed by the system can be, are you looking for the definition of this illness? And the generated answer, no, I want to know about the treatment. So we have a couple of these answers that are kind of in the same line. But what I want to point out here is that the answers don't really need to be yes or no. So they can be really something else. So for example, in the 4th example, or second to the last. But also one of the challenges that we saw is, for example, in the last example, where the what hobby stores carry trains, and the question is this a hobby for an adult? The generated answer is yes. And this is a very personal question actually. So either GPT-2 thinks it is very an adult, or considers themselves adult, or this is just basically a hallucination, or it's not clear how to answer personalized questions. So one of the things you can improve this model on is maybe introduce controllable parameters like cooperativeness. So whether the answer is going to leak the information need or not, or it's going to be very short. There are also an issue of multi-turn interactions. So we crowdsource a data set, which you can also find on the GitHub repository, where you can analyze how good, when the humans answer good and bad clarifying questions. What are bad clarifying questions? These are like repetitive questions, or the questions that are completely off topic. And this is something that we need to be able to actually build user simulators that can respond to these type of questions. And also tying to Alex's talk, answering comparative questions, multifaceted questions, that's all possible improvements. Yeah, finally, I think in this conference there's been a lot of talk on user simulation, and some of the points are also here, but this can also be left for the discussion. And yeah, you can find the code and the data on the GitHub repository. Yeah, feel free to connect. Thanks.
Great, fantastic. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions for our speaker from the audience or online. I don't currently see questions online.
Yeah, hi, Ivan. Thank you very much, Alexander Bondarenko. Once I was talking to someone who had done much more user studies than me, and we discussed the time pressure for the user studies. So basically, if you set for the task some particular time limits, the results would be different when you say, well, okay, you can spend any time on a particular task. Right, so what was your setup, and why did you choose it? I mean, like with time limits or without?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we used Amazon mTurk both for acquiring the dataset and for annotating whether the answer is more useful or more natural. And in both settings, the users weren't really realistically constrained by time. There was a time limit of like 20-30 minutes just for the sake of them not having this open for forever. But in general, I think the problem with doing crowdsourcing studies is that these are the people who want to do as much as they can in as little time as possible. So it's always a play with paying enough per hit to actually get the quality users, using enough filters to have users that are only well approved or something like that. So yeah, that's a different issue. But considering time, we didn't restrict them.
Thank you. I think we actually have a question online from Zhenduo. And so I'll ask it on his behalf. I'm wondering how your user simulator can be used for evaluating the conversational search system, as the title says.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it can be used for evaluating conversational search system in a way where you have the system that is asking clarifying questions, and the answers, depending on the answers you get, you can either re-rank your results and then compare them again to the QRLs. So this is you can look into how Query Challenge was organized. That's basically the same setup, where you really wouldn't need people to provide answers, but this is. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a good starting point. Maybe we can discuss more on the panel.
Yeah.
Other questions? I think there was one over here.
Hi, Pierre Barre from Sorbonne University. I was wondering for multi-turn question answering, to leverage multi-turn answering from the user simulation, there's a need for consistency between answer. And do you, for example, if the system fails to generate another clarifying question, pertinent, relevant clarifying question, and ask, for example, the same, the user simulation train, in this case, may just repeat the same answer, while in this reality, the user may want to stop or to say, like, I don't know. Do you have any, like, technical idea or to leverage multi-turn consistency?
That's a great question, and this is exactly the reason why we also released this data set with bad clarifying questions. So these are the questions that are really repetitive. For example, if you ask 2 clarifying questions in a row, the current model is just going to answer them probably the same. But to actually understand how the users will answer that, we have to kind of we had to do this crowdsourcing of the data set. And some initial analysis suggests that the users sometimes say, I already told you so, but in actually majority of cases, they just kind of repeat their information need in a different way. So that's also something you're all welcome to analyze as well. But it's going to be in the follow-up work as well. But the multi-turn model didn't really work as smoothly on this kind of data,
Great. Sounds like an open area for research. Related question, last question, and then we'll try to move on so we have time for the panel. But looking at the case of the human versus the generated questions, there are a bunch of cases where the human was judged to be more natural in terms of the human still winning. So looking at those losses for the generative approach, what's missing? What's happening? What are the nature of those kind of losses for the generation system?
I'm not sure. So one of the things that also I realized in recent couple of months is that the generated answers never contain punctuations. So that actually might explain if why they were perceived maybe as not as natural, but I would really, and that's on my to-do list, to go into the crowdsourcing data that I published on for this and actually see whether the punctuations are or not in there.
I bet it's punctuation, but I bet there's also a lot more in terms of just the nature of maybe hallucinations and other forms of just.
And also I think since these were 2 different studies, so naturalness and usefulness, I think when you try to explain this task to a crowdsourcer, sometimes it's very hard to really think of one specific dimension of this of these answers. So whether it was judged by you never know basically what they actually think naturalness is based on the explanation you gave them. But that's the best we can do, I guess.
Great. Let's thank our speaker. So the last speaker we have is Zhenduo Wang from the University of Utah. They're going to be looking at some recent work from the Web conference, looking at kind of the use of risk and how we can use reinforcement learning to kind of balance and control risk. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay, can everybody see the slides now?
Yes, we can see your slides and we can hear you. So take it away.
Cool, okay. So hello everyone, this is Zhenduo Wang from the University of Utah AR Lab. I'm representing myself and Professor CLI. We're glad to have the opportunity to share our work in SCAI'22. In this work, we conduct an architectural study of conversational search, which revisits the problem of when to ask clarifying questions. We show how to solve this problem better than all existing baselines as conversational search policy learning. And we propose new simulation experiments to evaluate the conversational search based on entire multi-turn sessions. So we observed the status quo of conversational search studies by 2020, and most system studies uses this systems architecture. And this architecture is given an information need. It first decides whether to ask a clarifying question. Then based on this decision, it either calls the asking clarifying question module or the result retrieval module, and then return their output. Now you may want to ask, why can't we just show both the results and questions, as some search engines have already started doing so? I think a reasonable explanation is that we can think about mobile devices with a smaller screen, or voice assistant like agents where there could be only one type of response. So following this architecture, many works have been done on how to better predict whether to ask a question or how to better generate it, which is shown in the red and green boxes. However, we argue that this is not the best architecture for conversational search applications. And here is an example of why it may fail. In this example, the user searches for what is transformer. Our search system knows that transformer refers to the deep learning architecture, the character in the movies, or the circuit unit. Then it tries to generate a useful clarifying question, but it fails badly because the question is just paraphrasing the initial query. As AI researchers, I believe we mostly agree that this is what our language generation model or retrieval models will do due to their lack of sense of semantics. So the user thinks our system is not very intelligent, and therefore they leave. This case happens because although we do need to clarify some ambiguous query, we are not guaranteed to generate a good one. And it's very important to remember this when we add the system initiative to our applications. And here is our proposed risk controlling architecture, the first contribution of our work. The difference is that we run both the question module and the result module first. Then we make the decision of choosing one of them. By doing this, we control the quality of what to return. So we control the the risk of downgrading users' experience. And here is our implementation. We use retrieval-based question and result models in our work, implemented as polling order revampers. In fact, our architecture can be easily adapted to question generation models. And the risk controlling model is the core of our work, implemented as a deep forward net. Its goal is to take in all the representations of the current conversation, including the query, the conversation history, the current search result, and the tentative clarifying question. Then it makes the decision. The second contribution of our work is a reinforcement learning algorithm to train this decision-making model. The reason for reinforcement learning is deciding which action to take is more than just binary classification or pairwise ranking. It would be that simple if both the actions and the conversation needed. That way, we can evaluate the outcome of these actions. However, the actual workflow is that whenever a good clarifying question is asked and then got user's response, we will go to the next round. Then how do we evaluate going to the next round? Is it better than just returning the current results or otherwise? And therefore, we need to know, quote unquote, the future to make such decisions. This type of decision-making problem has well been modeled by Markov decision process, or MDP. And reinforcement learning is the common solution to it. Following MDP definitions, the decision-making model is called policy. In fact, by casting it as MDP, the policy has become more than just a when-to-ask model. It sees the future of the question and decides whether it's worth it. Therefore, it does not only prevent the bad questions, but also the useless ones. And to test whether our architecture is beneficial, we designed a simulation experiment, which is our third contribution. So the simulation loops the Markov decision process, which can also be seen as a state machine. That is, whenever a good question is asked, we collect user's response and go to the next one. Whenever a result or bad clarifying question is asked or returned to the user, the simulation ends. And evaluation is only done at these terminal states. The user response simulator is a lookup table under our retrieval state. So if the clarifying question returned is present in the original conversation log, the user will return the next utterance as the response. Otherwise, it's considered as a bad question. We tested our system on 3 datasets with multi-turn conversation, which can support our simulation experiments. We randomly sample answers and questions from other conversations as negative candidates, and the retrieval models need to rank a set of 100 candidates and find the broad truth answer or the ground truth clarifying question. We evaluate their output not by their ranking performance of any single term, but with session-based metrics. The general idea of session-based metrics is to reflect users' search experiences in our metric by punishing bad clarifying question if they cause user to leave. So session-based recall and MR are measured at the turn when the result is returned. But if the user leave earlier because of bad questions, they will be 0. The other metric is the decision error rate. By its name, it's the frequency of our policy making the wrong decision. So there are only 2 possible decisions. The wrong one is when it chooses to return the bad question, or when it chooses to return bad results when the question is actually a good one. And we compare our system with 4 baselines, representing some naive ways of leveraging system initiative in conversational search system. Q0A, Q1A, and Q2A are the fixed policies that indifferently ask 0, 1, and 2 questions before returning the answer. Among them, Q0A represents the prototype system where there's no system initiative. Oh, sorry. Q1A and Q2A represents the systems that use system initiative in a fixed and brute force way. The context prediction baseline is the commonly used baseline that first predicts the need of asking clarifying question. And finally, Oracle is the system that always chooses the best decision, which is also the performance upper bound of all these systems. So for time concerns, that is all of our work. In the paper, we show that our system can significantly outperform all baselines on multiple datasets and user types. That shows that our architecture can be a better solution to leveraging mixed initiative in conversational search. In the end, we want to summarize the three contributions of our work. First, we propose a new risk-aware conversational search architecture with the implementation to control the risk between returning results and asking clarifying questions. And then we propose a reinforcement learning approach to train our system. Finally, we design a simulation experiment with session-based metrics to evaluate our system, attempting to approximate users' search experiences in real world. Thank you.
So I think we have time for maybe one or two questions before. I want to make sure that we have time for the panel. So do we have questions for our speaker?
Thanks for the talk. I had maybe it's just a quick question, but I was wondering, how did you get the clarifying questions out of this data set, those data sets that you use? Because I don't think they have really labels for when a uterus is or isn't a clarifying question. So I was wondering, how did you manage to do that?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So in the data set, we have multi-turn conversations. Some data set has very good structures that shows this is the end of this conversation and this is the final answer. So we consider all the like the agent's response prior to that last turn as clarifying questions. We check them, and usually they are mostly they are clarifying questions.
Okay, so I think I understand that all the previous interactions with the user are considered as clarifying questions then?
Yeah,
is that it? Yeah, okay, thank you.
And then last question.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. My question is about your session-based evaluations. Do you have any specific reason why you use the session-based other than the turn level? Because as far as I understand, especially if you're using the reinforcement learning, then the turn level, if you use the turn level evaluation, then you can know where the question is a problematic, like which turn is a problematic if you use a turn level evaluation.
Yeah, so I actually have an appendix. So the answer to your question lies in the workflow of our system. So if we use turn-based methods, imagine that in the first turn, a good clarifying question is asked to the user, but in the second turn, and so this turn will have a very high score because the question is probably very relevant. But in the second turn, if the question is bad and the conversation is ended by the user, then the point of asking the first question is not that meaningful. So we want to use our metric as a reflection of users' search experience, including whether they get the final result and whether they feel engaged in this conversation. So the thing we care in the end is whether user gets a good result. And that is measured by these session-based we call an MR. Yeah. So for your point, we use decision error rates to in some way reflect the system-wise performance. So this is not a direct reflection of whether user received the final results, but from this number, we can see how many times the system makes the correct decision, and we just get an idea of how these systems are doing now. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Let's thank our speaker.
Thank you.
So we, for the remaining part of the session, I think we're going to have a little bit of engagement. So we're going to ask the panelists, the speakers, to come up here, and I'll move over to the lectern. We'd also ask if we could have the virtual speakers as well. reminder that the audiences can also ask questions online for the panel. I have one or two questions to kick off some of the panel discussion for our panelists, but then I would also like to encourage the audience to be able to ask questions. I'm not sure if this mic is on. Can you hear this? Mic is, okay, that sounds like it's better. It's just very soft, so I'll let the panelists do most of the talking. So the first question that I have for our panel is that we've seen, there we go, thank you. We've seen that throughout a running theme throughout a lot of these talks has been looking at the role of scaling and the role of user simulation. And there were some questions from the audience and as well as myself looking at kind of what is the future of simulation? And if so, what needs to change in our current simulators to look at scale, multi-turn complexity, and all the different elements. So I'll turn over to if one of our panelists would like to talk about that question. One or more of them multiple people can answer.
So maybe I can start. So I definitely think user simulators have a bigger role in this type of evaluation of systems than are currently being utilized. But it kind of goes back to what was discussed in the previous session. Like there are some aspects of the of conversational search systems in general that really need to be evaluated by real users. But we need to identify those aspects and go into that direction. But I'm pretty confident that some of the things can be quite well evaluated by the user simulators as well.
Just to add, Jeff, I think you asked me about why focus on our personalization. No, but not on the personalization, but rather on personal values, right? Mm-hmm. So I then not sure how we could simulate personal values. Yeah. So our user simulation is good, but there are scenarios when we are maybe will not be able at all to simulate.
Yeah, so just to build on that, we had some initial work and some other work that's kind of upcoming at CHIIR in conversational user interfaces, where we're looking at building synthetic personas, kind of narrative structures that have different aspects of gender and demographics, as well as interests and rationales for why they might be interested in that topic, to be able to kind of provide jumping off points for possible generation or simulation of that so that people could elicit different aspects. So that's one approach. I'm not sure that's the answer, but it's one aspect. Could be generating also some of those synthetic kind of user personas to go with the different information needs that could allow that. But yes, does anyone else want to jump in on simulation? Anyone from online? Sandeep?
In terms of simulations, my hesitancy with really digging deeper into that side has always been that, especially with mixed initiative conversations, that there are a lot of assumptions, there are a lot of conditions. It's almost like you kind of like are already settling in on the action space without completely understanding the granularity of the space. So to me, that has been my apprehension. So basically, like, if a particular interaction is wrong, on what scale do you quantify that particular interaction is wrong? How do you weigh it? For instance, providing a wrong suggestion versus asking a wrong question are two completely different things. The penalty for that has to be also very different. The trajectory of conversations that ensure after that are also very different. And this is just like me giving you one sort of an example. So that has been my apprehension. But I think I do not want to discount the effort on that, because I do see great value where if we can silo out certain aspects of a mixed initiative conversation that needs to be evaluated, perhaps there is a lot of value in that. That's my thinking on the entire space of simulation for mixed initiative conversation.
Okay, thank you. I have some more questions, but I wanted to ask, does the audience have any questions for our panelists? Okay, well, your job is to, oh, okay, we have a question, go for it.
So, hi, yeah, I had a question, maybe more specific to Sandeep Avula. Sorry, if I'm not pronouncing that right. Is that so? You mentioned several challenges, but do you think that one of them in particular is more important, or that you're currently working on? Thank you.
So one of the important challenges is that I think I am not actively working on it right now for a lot of other reasons, but getting the timing right. This has to be, I think, the first sort of like challenge that has to be thought about. When we think about these conversation systems, we always are talking about it in terms of responses, the content of the responses, the response generation. But there is this element of timing which is super important for mixed initiative interactions, and that has I don't think that has received a lot of attention. So I think that is the first big challenge that we need to tackle.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, as a follow-up to that, I guess timing is very different if the interaction is via text or speech. So yeah.
Yes. I actually 100% agree because your working memory will operate way differently with visual versus like voice. So with visual, your capacity is more; with voice, your capacity is less. So timing becomes even more important.
Okay. Thank you, Sandeep. That's great. Was anyone else like to respond to the question? Or have anything to add?
So I was thinking about the splitting to multi-turn question, and can I share my thoughts on that?
Yes, I think you can.
Oh, so yeah, I basically agree with even that user simulator would be a very big part in scaling to multi-turn. So I thought about it, and I believe there are two most obvious ways when we can scale curve research to multi-turn setting. So basically to modeling multi-turn conversation, we either need these multi-turn conversation data sets, or we can have a user simulator that can simulate the response on the top of single turn clarifying question. And that way we can probably free ourselves from making these data sets, because now we can just go to any depth, assuming the user simulator is very reliable.
So just to understand, is that the comment on that maybe for actually building multi-turn like user simulators or something, we don't need proper multi-turn data in a way that's being acquired now, or?
Right. What I'm saying about using simulator is, so suppose we have a query and we have a clarifying question model, and then we have a user simulator. We can just run the clarifying model and user simulator in a pipeline that creates the multi-turn data for us, assuming they all create reasonable output.
That sounds like a really hard challenge to me. It sounds like I think one challenge that we faced has been looking at long-term trajectories. So having the coherent and kind of topical transitions really kind of reflect a change in the topic flow and an information need to be in a natural way when moving to multi-turn. That's been kind of the challenge. And instead of kind of stitching single turns together, how are these connected in a way that is meaningful and is kind of keeping the conversation going in ways and taking it in different directions in ways that would be natural, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I was also thinking of kind of just plugging in my model and have like several turns of clarifying questions and answers. And then you have suddenly huge data sets. You can maybe train your reinforcement learning models or something like that. But these data sets are not going to be, the trajectory is not going to make sense. It's hard to really make it in a proper way, I guess.
So what do people think of large-scale neural language models like GPT-3 and others for multi-turn generation? Has anyone tried that? And if so, what has your experience been?
Oh, I had some experience about that. The very big part of their generation. So the reason was they don't understand the semantics behind what they generate. So they don't really understand the small differences between a deal-fix question and related but useful question. I feel that's the current problem of the generation models.
Yeah, I haven't tried them yet, the GPT-3 or J, but I feel they're gonna be much better if I just put the same input that I put in, the old GPT-2, and the answers might be even more diverse. So, yeah, maybe I do that.
I have questions, but I'd also like to take more questions from the audience as well for our panelists. Do we have more questions? If not, your job as the audience is to come up with one. Okay, yes.
Hi. In general, in all the data sets and a huge amount of the studies that are done in English because it's the thing we have most information on. How do you think these works you've done might be if you change the language to Spanish, Chinese, or any other language? Might there be any difference on how you'd work, or?
So you're saying what are the maybe cultural and language variations in mixed initiative across across different languages and cultures, and has anyone looked at that?
Well, as far as I don't think I have come across that. And to be honest, like speak like 4 languages. Like I don't, when I talk to people or like talk with agents, I don't talk in one language. So to me, a lot of data sets are actually quite unnatural to the way I actually do conversation. But to my knowledge, I don't think I have seen the kind of work that you may be to like look at.
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, I have no experience in with that specific thing, but it's always been of interest to me, like just knowing about these sort of cultural differences. But it also can be maybe the first step could maybe be personalization and just seeing, some users will lose patience very quickly. Some users will be more cooperative with the, with the system or not. Some users will actually have different expectations of the conversational search systems than others, and yeah, maybe that's the steps to look at first, and then if somebody can map the known cultural differences between different nations to some dimensions. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'll maybe ask the panelists a question, and we'll also kind of keep the audience engaged. So come up with some more questions for the panel. So what's currently missing in mixed initiative research? Looking ahead to where you want to see the kind of conversational systems be, and the research that you want to be performing, but maybe you've been constrained. What would you like to see change? We've talked about data sets, but is it? Are there other things that need to change too? What's next, and what's missing?
Yeah, I would say data set is a big missing part. We have a few conversational search data sets now, but when we look at them, they don't represent all the search queries for all search scenarios. And most of them are very artificial. Like when users use our search engine, they won't type in what if. They will just type in the keywords they are interested in. If the query is short, then there's very little room for our work to work on. But that is what actually we need to work on. So I think I'd like to see some big players of search engines publish their data sets.
Okay.
I would like to add that maybe understanding what we actually want to get with mixed initiative is going to help us also define the steps. So something like kind of identifying different system initiative approaches or taxonomy of some sort, like actually I think Sandeep's work is a great work towards that direction, is also important to understand where what we can do and what we need to do that. And for example, in my work I presented, I've been dealing only with clarifying questions in terms of ambiguous or faceted queries, and basically that's super narrow considering what mixed initiative can be. But what can it be? Like stuff pops out every now and then, but yeah, it's hard to organize that.
I want to add on, I think problem definition on how we are going to formulate problem for these different tasks for understanding this initiative, that is important. Second thing is, I think we really need to get innovative for collecting data. Whenever, like, even when I think I kind of fall into the trap of thinking in a very grand fieldish kind of like experiment setup way. If you have a big set and you're trying to do like a match of it. I think we need to sort of like diverge from that way of thinking on how we want to create data sets for mixed initiative interactions. Because the beauty of it is that there is so much dynamicness that is there, and somehow the data sets need to that. So yeah, I think we need to make innovations towards some kind of methodologies towards collecting data for that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to add from any? Alex, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. I think we have time for maybe one more question from the audience. So Laura asked where we're going for drinks. So one of the great things about SCAI is there's a long tradition of us kind of social events. We would like to kind of get people together and build community and mixed initiative, and as well as all of the kind of conversational sessions that topics we've been discussing today. And so after this, we'll be, I think we'll be stick around, and we're hoping to go to the rooftop bar upstairs, if that allows, if we get there. So we'll be wrapping up. I want to make sure to thank all of our speakers and panelists in this session. It's been a really fantastic kind of group that kind of really has set the stage for a lot of clarifying questions and initiative, and I really see that this is really the starting point. As you say, that clarifying questions and a lot of these different actions and simulators are really in their infancy. So it'll be really exciting to see what this looks like next year and in the coming years, evolving to multimodal and evolving towards some of the ambient context that we saw that talked about from the Alexa keynote that we had from our speaker earlier things. Does anyone else have any closing comments that they would like to leave? Kind of if each of the panelists has a closing comment that they would like to add, you have a second or kind of a very brief statement that you'd like to make, go for it. Otherwise, we'll wrap up early.
No, I don't really have a statement, but I agree it's a very exciting area to work in, and it's all in the beginnings, basically. I was more like just leaning towards the mic if the audience doesn't have any questions. I had a question, but that we can, yeah, that's, I don't know if you're ending or, yeah.
Yeah, we have time for a question if you want to ask.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe also towards Sandeep's work, but also for discussion, we saw that system initiative is very time sensitive and very context dependent and very hard not to make the user, regret you initiating it. So did you think of any ways to offer help to the user, but rather with a prompt or something that they can either ignore or just continue working, rather than asking them directly and they need to stop whatever they're doing and kind of answer you?
Yeah, I have thought about that in terms of what are visual cues or what are other GUI elements that we could use to make it convenient. And I personally haven't done, but I think there is a lot of work in education psychology, especially between interactions between tutors and students, where I think there's a lot that we could learn how they do this. Because the problem setup has been like this in that space. You have these students who have different capacities of learning, and then you have these tutors, and the tutor has to continually adapt because everybody is not on the same learning level or the same learning style. So what are different ways that you can do it without really annoying or really losing the attention of students? Because for some students, providing suggestions is a way to encourage, for somebody else, maybe a way of discouraging because you're not letting them do the learning by themselves. So showcasing the fact as to when you can back off and also being able to I don't have an answer for that, but there have to be strategies devised around the particular problem that you have. That I think that problem I think is super interesting.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. I think we'll wrap up just so one small advertisement. If you're interested in Mixed Initiative, I'm organizing CAST this year, and there's a Mixed Initiative subtask. There's still time for you to participate. The topics will be released in the coming week or week, maybe probably next week or so. And there'll be question ranking, question generation, with kind of crowdsourcing there. So please consider participating in that. Again, let's thank our panelists for their time. And with that, I would like to just close up, and I would also, again, will try to stick around. Please join us for a social event. And I will say we have some generous sponsor support from Google and Microsoft to be able to support some kind of free drinks and things. So please join us for that. We look forward to talking to you more and keeping the conversation going. Cheers.